insisted that I go on after the break, and looking at the other speakers, I think I figured it out why. You know, with all the entertainers and comedians and everything else, that's not what we're going to do now. We're going to talk about politics, but we are going to try to do it in a little bit of a fun way. I want to talk about the 2016 election, and in my full presentation, we'd go through Congress, but we'd also talk about 2017. That's actually where we're spending the majority of our time with our clients right now. But we don't have that luxury today. We only have 12 minutes. So we're going to focus our discussion on the White House election. And real quickly, let me check with the audience. How many of you knew we were having an election for the White House this year? Everybody know? Okay, so you've seen a commercial or two. All right, well, anytime we do a White House review, we always do a good subjective analysis, but we like to pair that with a meaningful objective analysis as well. And today we're going to focus primarily on the subjective analysis, just out of interest of time. And as you know, we're down to two candidates at this point in the race. Really, two primary candidates, Hillary Clinton versus the Donald. Now, we predicted almost 3 years ago that Hillary Clinton would be the nominee for the Democratic Party. We never saw any other scenario that was likely, and we never wavered from that. I cannot tell you we had that same clarity around the Donald. But again, I want to see a show of hands. How many of you would agree that both of these candidates, to some degree or another, are fundamentally flawed? Would you agree? Yeah, there you go. I get a lot of two hands on that one. So let's have some fun and talk about some of those flaws. First of all, Hillary Clinton is running as a third term for President Obama. Now, if you're the third term of your party running for the White House, historically speaking, you're much better off running away from the current administration. But that's not what Hillary Clinton's doing. She's doubling down, tripling down, even quadrupling down on being a third term for President Obama. So she's swimming upstream, historically, just from that perspective. But in addition to that, we also know that she's got this consistent hangover issue around this email server, as well as the Clinton Foundation issue. That will be the most consistent drumbeat we hear from the Republicans over the next 70 days or so, because it works at the fundamental level of Hillary Clinton. The question of whether she has the judgment to be the President of the United States. You see, Hillary suffers from what I call the known factor. And what I mean by that is every single one of us in this room has known Hillary Clinton for 30 years. And if you know someone for 30 years, you probably have a fairly well-ingrained opinion as to who they are. So you can imagine from a political perspective, it's very difficult to then transition that thought into looking at Hillary Clinton in a new way. So that known factor is a bit of a headwind for her. Now, I know Donald Trump may not admit it, but he has a few flaws of his own. And what I mean by that is I call him an equal opportunity motivator, which means for every single person he's motivating to show up at the polls to vote for him, he's motivating at least one person to show up at the polls to vote against him. And that kind of wash transaction, that doesn't bode very well in a general election environment. You see, Donald Trump suffers from what I call the known-unknown element, which what I mean is that every single one of us in our heart of hearts with 100% certainty knows that we have no idea what Donald Trump will say tomorrow. And that known element really is a stumbling point for a lot more moderate Republicans to fully support Donald Trump. In addition to that, we also know that Democrats are going to continue to beat Donald Trump up about this lack of transparency issue around his finances and taxes. And really the reason why is it works on two levels. When you and I see a big personality like a Donald Trump, we have a bit of a natural skepticism as to, okay, are they really as big a deal as they think they are? So that's one way, but the more important way it works is at the level of Donald Trump. Because we know when anyone questions Donald Trump about his net worth or his success, it gets under his skin. And you and I both know when you get under Donald Trump's skin, that's when creative things happen. Usually in 140 characters or less. So to the extent the Democrats are able to keep him off message by keeping him focused on these personal issues, that will be an advantage for them in the general election. Now, would anybody disagree with me that Donald Trump has not necessarily put forward a female-friendly platform or a minority-friendly platform? Yeah. Now, last I checked, there are more women than men in the United States, but more importantly, women show up to vote more consistently than men. The only growing portion of our voting population is the minority population. So if I decide to run for president, but I had to tick off two constituencies, I probably would not have chosen those two. So I think that's a headwind for Donald Trump. Now, as challenged as both of these candidates are, they also both have opportunities. And what we mean by that is Hillary Clinton is generally more pragmatic than she's been campaigning throughout 2016. She had to move very far to the left in early 2015 to fend off who? Elizabeth Warren. You remember that? It was all the rage that Elizabeth Warren was going to enter the race and ruin Hillary Clinton's chance of being the first female president. So she moved to the left to make sure there wasn't enough room for Elizabeth Warren to enter the race. But then all of a sudden, Bernie Sanders became surprisingly competitive. That forced her to stay to the left, much more so than she would have liked to win a general election. But what she found out at the Democratic convention this summer is it wasn't just Bernie and Elizabeth, was it? It's actually the Democratic Party has shifted to the more progressive left. That's challenging her in a general election because now she has to move further to the middle in order to be attractive to independent voters. And she's really struggling with that two-step right now. Now, Donald Trump, he has some opportunities as well. And what I mean by that is he's led with platitudes and attitude. And that sounds like I'm being dismissive or insulting. I'm actually being complimentary. If you can win your party's nomination for the President of the United States and never be forced to give anything but one-line answers, good for you. That's a great general election platform to run from because you can't be hung on the details of your own policy positions. And we know when Donald Trump's been forced to give a little more depth to his positions, that's where he contradicts himself. And again, that's a challenge for him until he gets those policy positions out. That's most notably noted today because he's now trying to deliver a big speech today on immigration to clarify all the things he's been contradicting himself over the last several weeks. Now, in addition to that, we also know that Donald Trump has a core group of Republican voters that will support him no matter what. And I primarily do client events around the country, with non-professional individuals. And it's interesting, I had a gentleman come up to me afterwards and he said, the only way Donald Trump won't get my vote is if he breaks into my house in the middle of the night and murders me. And even then I'll vote for him via absentee ballot. So I don't know about you, but that sounds like a fairly committed Trump voter. So I'll go ahead and give Mr. Trump that ballot. But what we also know about Donald Trump is that he's negotiable and malleable. And I know what you're saying. You're saying, come on, Jeff, how do you know Donald Trump is negotiable and malleable? Well, we all know so because he told us in February. He said, I'll be changing very rapidly. I'm very capable of changing into anything I want to change to. Now, we're not going to debate the grammatical aspects of that sentence. That's not the point. What's clear is that Donald Trump understood the need to moderate his message once he entered the general election. And he first had that opportunity in May. And by the end of May, he delivered this nugget to us. He said, you think I'm going to change? I'm not going to change. And again, doubled down on that just last week by saying, I am who I am. I don't want to change. So it's that duality that is Trump that makes it very difficult for a lot of more moderate Republicans to feel confident in their support of their nominee. Now, as I mentioned earlier, we'd normally go through a good objective analysis and get into the data of the election, but we don't have time today, so let me just kind of wrap up the election. As we do believe at this point the Republicans are likely to keep control of the House, and that's because of the gerrymandering issue. They just have a numerical advantage over the Democrats all the way through 2022. We do believe the Senate has a slightly better than 50-50 chance of going the way of the Democrats. Now, what's important, though, is that they'll only have a simple majority. What a simple majority means in the Senate is they will lack the path to 67 votes to override a presidential veto. They'll have to rely on the minority party even to reach the 60-vote threshold for the filibuster minimum. So we're still going to have a very split kind of congressional environment, not that dissimilar to what we have right now. Now, I think a lot of us may believe that Donald Trump has a disadvantage in this White House election, but I'm here to tell you, in our opinion, Hillary Clinton has a tailwind, yes, but not necessarily an insurmountable tailwind. It really boils down to two reasons. One, Hillary Clinton's flawed, but they're both flawed. More importantly, she's the establishment candidate. She's the establishment candidate in a year where clearly the majority of electorate wants change. Change is the only way I can decipher in my mind or reconcile Donald Trump, Bernie Sanders, and Paul. You put those three together, the majority of American voters we're voting for change. And clearly Hillary Clinton generally does not exude change in her platform. Now, at the same time, though, while she does have that challenge, I think there's also another issue for the Democrats, and that's called the enthusiasm gap. I know a lot of you are here from Iowa, and in Iowa, Democrats and Republicans set records in your caucus in 2016. Good for you. But around the rest of the country, Republicans set records in almost every single state. Democrats, not so much. So that enthusiasm gap is really evaporating the objective opportunity the Democrats have in 2016. Now, what we do is we try to take that nonpartisan look at what we anticipate happening in Washington, D.C., and apply that to various industries that we speak to. You know, we look at healthcare, we look at financial, those are probably our two bigger areas that we speak to, but we also talk about energy and defense. And we track what we think's happening in Washington and the impact on legislation on those industries. So keep in mind, 2017, as interesting as 2016 is with the election, 2017 is the big year. It's the year after the presidential elections that big things happen. I remind you, when President Bush got elected, right afterwards, he passed the Bush tax cuts, one of the biggest tax cuts in U.S. history. We had 9/11 with the subsequent passing of the Patriot Act. President Obama, he did some pretty big things too right after he got elected. We had the Affordable Care Act, which obviously changed the scope of health care in the United States, but we also had the Dodd-Frank bill as a huge banking impact on that bill. If you're from banking or financial, you know what I mean. But in addition to that, he also got through, because of the financial crisis, nearly a $1 trillion surplus plan. So all of those things combined to say 2017 is going to be the policy year. That's where the rubber meets the road. And when we talk about our primary clients, this is who we speak to. We speak to business executives, we speak to sales meetings, I heard a lot of associations, we do a lot of association meetings. In addition to that, business owners, any high net worth or high income group, that's a natural audience for what we speak to. So with that, I want to thank you very much. I have 29 seconds left, so perfect timing. Hope you have a great rest of your meeting. Thank you very much.